Welcome, everyone. We're going to be starting in just a moment. Just one quick announcement. We do have Spanish interpretation available. If you're on the computer, you can go to the bottom of your screen. There should be an interpretation button and select the language that you like. We have Spanish interpretation available. And I'm actually going to pass it over to Genia to share that in Spanish. Also, if you're on your phone, there's a 3 dots that you can select to choose which language you'd like to hear in. Should be good to go ahead, Genia. Oh, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, that's good.
Okay. Just another note in English, if you are a monolingual Spanish or English speaker, you will have to turn interpretation on to be able to hear all of tonight's content. I also just want to remind speakers really quickly to please speak slowly and clearly to help interpretation along. And I'll just repeat that in Spanish. Tenemos interpretación al español e inglés. Le pedimos a todos los participantes que hablen lentamente y de forma clara. Si habla solo inglés o solo español, necesitará estar en un canal de un idioma para escuchar todo el contenido de hoy anoche. Al terminar este anuncio, la función de interpretación del Zoom va a ser activado. Si está en su computadora, va a haber un icono de un mundo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Haga clic en el mundo y seleccione el lenguaje de su preferencia. Si está usando Zoom desde su teléfono, haga clic en los 3 puntitos donde dice More, M-O-R-E, que significa más. Seleccione Language Interpretation, interpretación de idioma, y luego su lenguaje. Si tiene algún problema, ponga un comentario en el chat y trataremos de resolver el problema. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hakame, I greet you on this Indigenous Peoples Day. My nephew Matakas will begin our time together. He'll be honoring our ancestors, our elders, our descendants, and this circle that we create tonight. Matakas.
Start singing.
Okay.
Yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, yo, hey, yo, oh, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, yo, hey, yo, oh, hey, yo, oh, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, we are, yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, oh, I see. Thank you. Good morning.
Have a night, nephew.
Thank you, everyone.
Good song.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Pauline. I use a pronoun she, her, hers with the New York State Theomusicology team. And so we have a song that we wanted to offer up as well. So I'm going to share my screen. This comes from Dr. King's, one of Dr. King's last speeches. He talks about the song Up Over My Head, and that we are the masters of our nonviolent movement in disarming these forces. And talks a little bit more about that. So I wanted to kind of bring in that framing and bring in that history here as well.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
And I really do believe, I said I really do believe, change is coming out there.
Change is coming. We're having some trouble with my internet. So Joe, I wonder if you can share that video.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
And I really do believe, I said I really do believe, change is coming out there.
Change is coming out there.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see justice in the air.
I see justice in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see justice in the air.
I see justice in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see justice in the air.
I see justice in the air.
And I really do believe,
I said I really do believe a change is coming out there. Change is coming out there.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see love in the air.
I see love in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see love in the air.
I see love in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see love in the air.
I see love in the air.
And I really do believe, I said I really do believe, change is coming out there.
Change is coming out there.
Over my head,
Up over my head,
I see peace in the air.
peace, peace,
Up over my head,
peace, peace,
I see peace in the air.
peace, peace,
Up over my head, oh, I see peace in the air.
peace, peace.
And I really do believe, I said I really do believe, change is coming out there.
Change is coming out there.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
Up over my head,
Up over my head,
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
Up over my head.
Up over my head.
I see freedom in the air.
I see freedom in the air.
And I really do believe, I said I really do believe, change is coming out there. Oh, 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 change is coming out there. Oh, 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 change is coming out there. Oh, 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 change is coming out there. Oh, oh, oh.
Good evening. Thank you so much to Matakis and Reverend Holly and Pauline and Jamal and Sharon for that powerful grounding. My name is Reverend Wes McNeil, and I'm the Executive Director of the Labor Religion Coalition of New York State and a Tri-Chair of the New York State Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Thank you so much to all of you for being here on this Indigenous Peoples Day for Land Back and the Third Reconstruction, a Truth Commission with the Shinnecock Nation. When we first started planning this event, we hoped that it could be in person, but it is amazing to be able to gather virtually with so many people calling in from so many different places tonight, and so we're grateful for that. I am joining tonight from Mohican Territory, what is now Schenectady, New York. And I want to start with just a few housekeeping items. As you heard already, we have Spanish interpretation available. And in addition to that, there is closed captioning. You can click on the button on the bottom of your screen that says live transcript, and you'll be able to see subtitles. And the chat tonight is available and open for folks to send messages to the host and panelists. And we'll have an opportunity after we hear testimony to invite folks to share some reflections or thoughts that have touched you. That said, as we have learned over the last 18 months, there are times when folks join Zoom calls to be disruptive. And so if that happens, we may have to disable the chat. So if it goes away, that's why. But hopefully we can continue with that. So tonight is the first in a series of Truth Commission events that the Labor Religion Coalition will be holding across the state over the coming year, in collaboration with the Poor People's Campaign and other partners. And so I want to spend just a few minutes introducing what we mean by Truth Commission. Truth Commissions and similar events where directly impacted people speak for ourselves about our conditions and our demands have been a really important tool that has been used for decades by the network of organizations that are now taking up the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And in 2017, as part of organizing toward the launch of the Poor People's Campaign, the Cairo Center spearheaded a national Truth Commission on the right not to be poor, with events around the country that lifted up the plight, fight, and insight of the poor and dispossessed. In other words, not only highlighting the pain and injustice that we experience, but also the ways that people on the front lines of poverty, racism, militarism, and ecological devastation are resisting and organizing and coming up with solutions to our problems. Here in New York, the Labor Religion Coalition organized the Truth Commission on Poverty in New York State in 2017. And at those hearings, which took place in Allegheny County and Schenectady and Wyandanch, Long Island, we heard and saw vividly how folks upstate and downstate in urban, rural, and suburban communities and of every background were struggling against the same system that denied them access to housing and healthcare and living wage jobs and adequate food and education and more. Through that process, we began to build relationships and a shared analysis that laid a foundation for the Poor People's Campaign in New York State. Nationally, truth commissions and people's hearings and mass meetings and other events lifting up the plight, fight, and insight of the poor and dispossessed have been and continue to be an important movement building tool for the Poor People's Campaign, both by bringing together directly impacted leaders who then continue to organize and be in solidarity with one another, and also by shaping the analysis and the demands of the Poor People's Campaign. As we're approaching 5 years since the Truth Commission on Poverty in New York State, our intention for this series of Truth Commission events is to continue to build a movement of the poor and dispossessed to end poverty, systemic racism, militarism and colonialism, and ecological devastation. We're not merely here to bear witness to injustice, as important as that is. We're committed to changing the systems and structures that are the cause of our poverty and dispossession and oppression. And to do so requires truth-telling, directly confronting the lies that we're steeped in, that deny or justify racism, that blame the poor for poverty, that claim that there isn't enough for all of us to have what we need. And it also requires breaking us out of our isolation, coming together across historic lines of division for the purpose of building power. It's fitting for this series to be beginning on Indigenous Peoples Day and to be confronting this foundational evil of the United States, the dispossession and genocide of Indigenous people. And we're so honored to be hosted tonight by the Pataquohan Medicine Lodge, and so grateful for the generosity of the leaders we're about to hear from in sharing about the plight, fight, and insight of the Shinnecock. We recognize, of course, that tonight we're hearing from just one of many Indigenous nations whose lands make up what is now New York State and the United States, and the experiences of different peoples is different. And yet we know that all across New York and North America, Indigenous communities are disproportionately impacted by the intersecting evils that the Poor People's Campaign is organizing to fight: poverty, systemic racism, militarism, environmental devastation, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. The theft of Indigenous land, the attacks on Indigenous culture and language, and the physical and spiritual violence visited upon Indigenous communities are not just sins of the past, but are ongoing all around us. And the struggles of Indigenous people for sovereignty and protection of their lands are a critical front of struggle in building a movement of the poor and dispossessed. Our futures are bound up in one another, and the liberation of Indigenous peoples is critical to the liberation of all the poor and dispossessed and oppressed. And so we're so grateful and honored to be here tonight. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to my sister, Reverend Holly Hale Thompson, who will introduce our testifiers for this evening.
Tebene West, thank you so much. I take just one moment to honor Matakas for opening our circle tonight. He sang an honoring song, and he is a great grandchild of Indigenous children who survived the boarding school system, grandchild and child of folks who keep and teach our culture. The orange shirt behind me now represents more than 6,500 Indigenous children's bodies that have been identified as being in mass graves or unmarked graves, and who experienced undocumented deaths in the residential and boarding schools in Canada and the United States. There's words fail me when I am speaking about what our people experienced during residential and boarding school, and now in the trauma of these realizations, because our people have been telling the truth for many, many decades. And you hear phrases like truth and reconciliation. And I am sorry, but I don't know who is ready for reconciliation when we have yet to hear and walk through truth together, which is why I'm very hopeful about this opportunity tonight. And so September 30th was the Orange Shirt Day. That shirt represents 6,500 dead Indigenous children, and that number is rising. We're also thinking about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two spirits. I've asked my sister Becky to speak first. She is a leader among our people for graves protection. She's a leader among our people for founding the Women Against Violence Everyday Prayer Fire, which is now in the heart of the Shinnecock Reservation and has been for 8 years. And she is going to share her truth in this commission now. Becky?
Wait. Oh, enough with the lens cap on. So hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Becky Genia from the Shinnecock Nation here, Southampton, Long Island. So such a huge subject to talk about. Thank you for making this possible. So there's over 300 people already participating in this Zoom, which is really nice to know that, you know, people really do care and they still want to listen. Although a lot of times, you know, the truth is hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. So I think what I want to talk about first of all is the Hamptons that we live in. It's actually very crazy to live with these billionaires for so long and still keep your composure due to the unjust way that our land was stolen from us. And not just that, but we'll take your land and then you're not allowed to talk about it. So from every direction, we get worse than a slap in the face. We get, you have to take what we dish out, and that's all there is to it. So no, that's not happening anymore. We were given a system that was designed to fail. It was designed to steal our land. Whatever was left that they didn't already take between 1640 and 1859, I guess that was taken too long to get all of our land. So they figured out ways to take everything, all except for the 800 acres of our Shinnecock territory now, which is a peninsula. And so in 1859, they put us in this swamp, and it is the marshland. And although it's what we have left and we make the best of it, it's still a swamp, and it's very hard to breathe here. Apparently, we were supposed to die within 2 more generations of swamp fever, but we've outlasted since 1640 and the 1700s with all the smallpox and the yellow sweats, as they called them, and the 1800s with the railroad coming through. So and all that is not to say, feel sorry for us. We're just victims and all that. No, it's not like that at all. We are the indigenous people of Long Island. We have always been here, and we are still here. And although when the colonials came over here, and what they did was, one of the first things they did was offer us their alcoholic beverages, which of course our systems could not tolerate, along with the foreign diseases, which our bodies could not tolerate. So here you have a way to kill and to dehumanize. Actually, it was really a form of genocide and dehumanization, and to do this to a people. There was no such thing as poverty before 1640. No one was poor. We helped each other. We took care of each other. There was no hunger. Someone needed a house built, we helped them build it. Someone needed food, whatever. That's the way the system was. That's the way it worked well. And of course, nothing on earth is ever perfect, but we did live in harmony and balance with our sacred Mother Earth. And for the most part with each other. We were very peaceful people, the Shinnecocks were. And so when the colonials came here, we didn't really know. We were just, being hospitable, being generous. That was in our nature. So to get treated so unfairly and so fast, they came in June of 1640, and by December of 1640, so there was a foreign language, there was a language barrier, there was this introduction to alcohol. The second that they shook our hands was the second that we started getting sick, because we could not fight those diseases that they brought over on the ships. Our society went downhill very fast. And by December of 1640, so much land had already been stolen from us. And now we have to, and our sacred places to this day are being desecrated and destroyed. They have made golf courses on the graves of our ancestors. The desecration that they did to construct these golf courses, it's like egregious damage was done to numerous burial mounds during the construction of the Shinnecock Hills Golf Course. Everything is documented. And I really don't understand for the life of me why we still sit here on 800 acres in a swamp while they have taken it upon themselves to destroy the Shinnecock Hills and to play golf, billionaires playing golf on desecrated graves of our ancestors. And just the 4 golf courses alone, it's beyond an insult. It is beyond human comprehension how one human being can treat another human being like this. But we're called poor and we're called savages, but you're sitting on hundreds and hundreds of acres of desecrated graves of the Shinnecock people, sipping your cocktails and eating your lobster and teeing off the skulls of our ancestors. And we're not allowed to say anything about that. We can't breathe in the swamp over here, but does anybody care that our homes are full with mold and mildew and rats from the swamps? Does anybody care? No, because in the Hamptons, everybody's rich. Well, yeah, okay, so we do own the Hamptons. We used to think, oh, we were caretakers for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but they took advantage of the fact that we called ourselves caretakers and not owners back then. Now we have to call ourselves owners of the Hamptons, because in this white world, you have to own something or else you're nothing. So we own the Hamptons. And we are sick and tired, literally sick, and very tired of taking this abuse from people in the town of Southampton who refuse to recognize that there is racism and there is injustice for 380 years. And there are shanties that we have to live in while the billionaires build their mansions on stolen land and desecrated graves. So, you know, I don't know. We're just going to keep on fighting here. We are going to fight as hard as we can, and we're not shutting up anymore. The women of my tribe didn't even get equal rights, right to vote, right to speak, until 1994. So I guess we had our own little Taliban going here or something. Something is desperately wrong here. And I swear to you, I'm not shutting up anymore. There are so many wrongs that we have to right. And it starts from, you know, the basics, the down, dirty, rotten basics. And I know that this town of Southampton does not want us to have a voice and to tell anyone, much less everyone, how cruel and rotten and what scoundrels they have been to my people for so very, very long. So we have a lot of work to do, and we're going to continue to do this work. And I tell you that building these alliances with people, the movement, it just reminds me of the spirit, because I've been in the American Indian movement since I was 17 years old. And that spirit of the movement really came back with the Standing Rock pipeline protests. And, you know, people came together and they laughed and cried and suffered and celebrated all together for a common cause. We have got to stop this pipeline of destroying Mother Earth. And that's how we feel right here in our own ancestral territory. The overdevelopment in Southampton is out of control. They're like tax junkies around here. They do not care. They don't care about the earth and how sacred and precious she is. We all have to breathe this air. We can't even eat the shellfish or the fish out the bays anymore. Everything is being polluted. We literally have to clean up the shit of the billionaires because their sewers are just as rotten as ours over here in Shinnecock. We have a lot of work to do. And, you know, we're going to do it. So that spirit of building these alliances back up again, because when you need me, I want to help you. And when we need you, you know what I'm saying? We need each other. We need each other. And that's all there is to it. Black, white, yellow, red, all of us. All these beautiful brown people, all these beautiful white people, all these beautiful, we're human beings. And we screwed up shit together, so we're going to fix it together. That's what we're going to do. And these Hamptons, we got to tell them, you're not going to get away with this for one more minute. No one should be living in a tent on this reservation or in Hampton Bays or in that township of East Hampton or Bridgehampton or Fancy Pants, Hampton, nothing. And we're getting ready to roll up on these billionaires and tell them this is not acceptable behavior anymore. And starting with the town board of Southampton, they have a whole lot of putting aside their hatred and their animosity that we have survived. That's what they're mad at us for surviving. And the only use they have for Shinnecock Indian is our Labor Day weekend powwow, so that they can put it on their tourist attraction bulletin. Well, what kind of nonsense is going on around here? We're done with this craziness. And to build these alliances and to have people listen to us is really a beautiful thing. So I'm going to say that's enough for now. And thank you so much for asking me to speak tonight.
Tabane, Becky, Tabane. As if that's not enough, there's more. The next woman to speak her truth is Tina Tarrant, another sister, and she is the teacher and one who is leading the revitalization of our Shinnecock language. So, Tabane, Tina.
Tina Tarrant de Suis, Hadakohan Chashayawang, Shinnecock Chapanawang, and Hashinaak Natap. My name is Tina Tarrant. I'm from the Thunderbird family of Shinnecock Nation. I live on Shinnecock Reservation. And I get really nervous talking in front of a crowd. But what means the most to me is language, so I do it anyway. Our Shinnecock community is a nation, and every aspect of our society affects each one of us directly. So we all have the responsibility to care for and protect our people, our culture, and our territory. And we all have the same basic needs to live in this world on our good Mother Earth. Our culture is why we are here. That's why the Creator put us in this place. And our culture is unique, and it needs to be cared for and protected. And we as Shinnecock people have been exposed to the devastating impacts, as well as opportunities for cooperation with people from outside of our nation, from the efforts of colonialism from the 1600s through the 2020s. Shinnecock people have encountered many life-changing situations due to the new neighbors. Each of the governments, the English, the Dutch, and the United States of America, have created laws and policies about our people. Shinnecock was never included in those decisions. The people weren't even citizens of any of those countries when those choices were made. In 1924, American citizenship was imposed on our people, but again, that was not our idea. We didn't ask for it. Okay, so since the 1600s, there have been laws that prohibited our religious ways and restricted our ability to travel and interact freely. That's a big part of our culture. At least 4 times a year, there are ceremonies that involve traveling from community to community all across Long Island, across the Sound, through Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. And with the laws against it, there was lost opportunities for the people to visit, sing, dance, and pray together in their own language. And then with the boarding school policies, when they came around, our children, the children who were taken from their families, they had to learn to hide the culture that they were raised in. And many of those who did survive, when they came home, they didn't pass on the cultural knowledge to the next generation. It was too dangerous. Well, there were people who did speak our language. When my grandfather was growing up, he didn't learn to speak it fluently, but he always remembered hearing it spoken and in songs. So remembering, using, and teaching our cultural ways has always been important in our family. Right now, there are no fluent speakers, but I'm working to change that. Remembering what has been passed down in our family, my cousin and I began piecing the language back together. I've used the Bible that was printed in 1661 in the Algonquin language to learn more about word structure, word sentence building, and language patterns and vocabulary. So we gathered as many materials as we could get our hands on from all over Long Island and the communities north of the Sound. Our languages are different in dialect, but not so different overall. So back here at home, we started naming children in our language. Now some of those children have children and grandchildren of their own. But by putting our words back into everyday use, being able to learn from each other's names was a big start in reclaiming our language. Off and on over the past 10 years or so, I taught some language classes on Shinnecock using everyday phrases, and we played games using the language. And there were classes for the teachers who were going to teach at the preschool on the reservation before it opened 5 years ago. And it takes a lot of time to sort everything out, fill in all the blanks, and teach as well. So I took a job 5 years ago at Stony Brook University in the linguistics department. Because there I would work with community language teachers and linguists who were familiar with other dialects. And the course was open to the SUNY students for credit, but it was also open to native community learners. And that was a way to bring in other people in the hopes of developing more language teachers. So with access to these resources and being paid to work there, I look forward to getting back to having classes on Shinnecock after the pandemic lifts up. Tabine.
Tabine, Tina. Our next speaker is Jennifer Ellen Tuffy Wilson. She is a lifelong resident of Shinnecock, and she is an elder and a leader among our people. She is going to share her truth about life and challenges and the realities of an Indigenous woman from Shinnecock.
Okay, good name, Miss Hollow. This past year, 2020, and the beginning of 2021 has been a very hard year for all of us because of the pandemic. But there has been so many other things that have been happening during this time. And I was looking on Facebook, and during the January 6th incident that happened at the Capitol, and a lot of other things that was also happening around, but that one there really got to me. And I sat and I wrote something about my feelings at that time, or what I was feeling and what I was going through and what I wanted to express to people. So I want to read it to you. Since 1492, Indigenous people have been murdered, beaten, raped, physically, sexually, mentally abused. Our language has been taken away from us. Our land has been destroyed. Our water poisoned. Our ancestors dug up and put in museums. Our sacred burial grounds have been destroyed for golf courses, condos, schools, businesses. Dug up for uranium, oil, gas, along with committing the one sin that this country will not admit as being the first sin, and that is genocide. To wipe us off the planet as if we never existed. This has been happening to my people since 1492, every single day. Nothing has changed. But yet we need to get over it. When will this be addressed? Because we're not going anywhere. We've proven this. However, this country keeps it quiet and keeps it under the rug. It's not important. As one of the country's generals said, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. COVID is killing them. So don't send them medicine, gloves, masks, or food. Send them body bags. I remember hearing and seeing this written or spoken about, that America's first sin was slavery. It wasn't. Everything I've written in the second paragraph that I just read is America's first sin. And that's the main problem, is it hasn't stopped. This story is just one of tens of thousands since 1492. Yes, all lives matter. However, when will that happen? When will there be justice for all? Minority communities have none. When will respect, honor, and peace for Indigenous people happen? When will the true history be told and taught? When will the white race apologize and admit your wrongs? When some of you have. However, it's not enough. As long as injustice prevails and the ones that are continually perpetuating it, and we all know who they are, this will not end. It's time to stop. It's time to stop talking. Actions speak louder than words. Now, I don't know if you all have realized, but in the past couple months, there's been a lot of things happening race-wise. A lot of bad stuff. Well, Native people have been dealing with this all our lives. This isn't anything new to us. We're tired of it, but it's not going to stop us from continuing to do what we need to do in order to survive and in order to teach our children there was a petition that was going around in Kansas that they wanted to bring back slavery. And it was in a school. I don't know if you all heard this, but it was in a school. And I was reading a paragraph on a Facebook page in the news part where it said that some white parents are telling school leaders that lessons about race make white students feel bad. And in the other, there's the racism that is actually happening in schools. Now, I understand about feeling bad about something, but I look at it like this. In order for this to change, we have to teach the truth. And yes, the truth hurts, especially here in this country. It hurts because the United States did not do right by Indigenous people. And because they didn't do right by Indigenous people, they have not been doing right by any people of color. They're just not doing it. And then they wonder why things are happening, bad things are always happening. Well, of course it's going to happen because you haven't even given us a chance to heal at all. Because you don't want to tell the truth. Because you know by telling the truth it's going to hurt. Well, you know what? It's better that you have that pain than to keep holding on to that lie. That is what your history is a lie. It's time to change it. It's time to start telling the truth so that we can, instead of looking at each other as different, that we can look at each other as brothers and sisters. What's wrong with that? Because that's who we are, actually, as brothers and sisters. I want you, when you look at me, I want you to see the color of my skin, because that's who I am. I don't want you to dismiss that. That's not being racist. What's being racist is when you do dismiss that, is when you say, oh, I don't see color. Really? Why not? Why not? Because this is who we are. This is who I am. I am an Indigenous Shinnecock Montauk woman. And I'm very proud of who I am. And I'm very proud of where I came from. But my people are tired. We're very, very tired. And our ancestors have been crying to us. And we have been working so hard to make sure that their tears are tears of joy, not tears of sadness. And what we have been doing with our grace protection, that's what we're doing with that. We're giving back the life to our ancestors that they lost because they've been crying to us to do it. The only way that anything is going to change, because what I just read to you, what I've been saying to you, I've been saying I am 60, will be 63. I've been saying this all my life. But yet it goes in one ear and right out the other. But when our allies speak, it makes a difference. To all you white people out there that believe in us and want to help us, speak up. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid. Speak up. Because that's the only way things are going to change around here. Because we have been saying this and saying this and saying this, and nothing has happened. I truly believe that when you speak up and you let them know that it's not right anymore, we have to do the right thing. We have to acknowledge the fact that what we have done to the indigenous people in this country is wrong. You need to speak up. And that's what I ask of you, to please speak up. Muskanawish.
Tabanay, Jennifer. Our last speaker will be Tila Troge. My claim to fame for her is that my great-grandmother and her great-grandfather were siblings. And that is the very least I can say about Tila, because as a young Shinnecock leader, she is taking her nation forward. She is an attorney. She is an advocate. She is a caring young woman, and she is our leader. She's going to talk today about our monuments, about the New York State lawsuit. She's going to share with us a call for action related to land preservation. Tila, Tabanay, for being here.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone that was able to join us tonight. This is a really important night. It's important for our voices to be heard, for our stories to be told, and for these injustices to be spoken out loud. Shinnecock people have been suffering ever since 1640, when the first colonists arrived here from Lynn, Massachusetts. We've been subjected to slavery. We've been sold off in court disputes for something so simple as digging up our ground nuts, our ancestral food from our ancestral land. We've been accused of all kinds of crimes and sold off to slavery in the West Indies. Our children have been stolen from us and sent to boarding schools for hundreds of years. And even today, we're still suffering. We're under constant attack from New York State. I saw just a couple hours ago, the governor issued a proclamation about Indigenous Day and stated that New York is going to be celebrating Indigenous Day. And she mentions the Shinnecock Nation, yet the Shinnecock Nation is under direct attack by the state of New York for attempting to engage in economic development. And so I'm sure some of you have heard about our latest economic development project, which is 2 monuments on the location of our ancestral territory. It's now known as Westwoods, but historically it was known as Nyamuck, and it was a place, it's an isthmus geographically. So it's a narrow piece of land between the Peconic Bay and the Shinnecock Bay, and it gives us access to the Atlantic Ocean. Historically, Shinnecock people, we survive off the sea. Shell fishing has always been huge for us. We've hunted whales, and we've shown the colonists to these skills so that they could survive here. But recently with COVID-19, we saw this surge of people come out from New York City. It was just a mass exodus of people who fled New York City and came out here to the Hamptons. And as Miss Becky said earlier, the colonists never developed any type of septic systems. So literally, these millionaires, these billionaires, their shit is polluting our water. And the federal government just declared our Peconic Bay as a federal disaster zone. 99% of the marine life has died. So there's no shellfish for us. There's no fishing anymore for us. On top of that, our economic development is attacked. Our monument signs We built these signs hoping that we could provide revenue for our elders, so that we could build a senior care center for them, so that we could take care of them at home, and for our children, so that we could provide a safe place for them, a daycare, a learning environment where we could surround them and capsule them with our culture and our language and our traditions, and so that we could take care of each other and so that we could feed each other. Because we need money to go to the grocery store, just like anybody else. We can no longer live off of the water the way that we have done for 10,000, 13,000 years. That way of life for us, it's not a reality anymore because of this horrible pollution from nitrogen. It's nitrogen that is it's overflowing in our waters, and it's from the lack of septic systems as well as fertilizers that are used to maintain these billionaires and millionaires' estates. Before COVID, they didn't even live here. They lived here for 2 months, but they still had to maintain their estates to create artificial lawns. And so all that runoff has just killed everything in the water. And so, but we're not just complaining, we're taking action. So one of the exciting projects that we're doing is engaging in sugar kelp farming. So we have a group of 6 indigenous Shinnecock women who are working really closely with an organization called Green Wave to attempt to grow this sugar kelp. It's a native indigenous species to our water, and it extracts nitrogen at a very rapid rate. So if you want to learn more, you can follow us. We're on Facebook and we're on Instagram. Just search Shinnecock Kelp Farmers. And that's a great way to follow us and to stay updated and just track and monitor our progress on cleaning up the water. Another really great resource, if you haven't seen it yet, is the movie Conscious Point. And if you have seen it, I think someone might drop a link in the chat. You can rent it now on Vimeo for only $5 if you search Conscious Point. But it's really a film. If you can get your local library, your local school, any type of learning or cultural institution that you're affiliated with to show this movie, it will go a long way in just bringing attention to the struggle that the Shinnecock people are engaged in, especially with our graves protection. A lot of us on the call are heavily involved with the Shinnecock Graves Protection Warrior Society. Recently, we had a small but very historic and important win. We partnered with the Peconic Land Trust to utilize some public monies from something called the Community Preservation Fund. It's basically a 2% real estate tax that is taxed on every real estate transaction in the 5 East End towns of Long Island. It's anything from a property transfer to an easement transfer. It all gets taxed this 2% rate. And so we were able to utilize that public money to purchase, preserve, and protect one of our most sacred burial areas called Sugarloaf Hill, together with the Peconic Land Trust. And it was 4.6 acres of land. The price tag was $5.6 million. So think about that. $5.6 million for 4 acres of land. But this land is extremely sacred to us. It's the heart of our Shinnecock Hills, which is the last bit of land that New York State stole from us in 1859 in violation of federal law. I shouldn't say the last bit, because the last bit they got in 1959 when they ran Sunrise Highway through our ancestral land at Westwoods. And so that goes back to the monument case where we put up our monuments to our continued existence and to our perpetual existence, because as other speakers have told us, the colonists, they were not successful in their complete extermination attempts against us. And we have survived, and we will find ways to continue to survive because that's who we are as a people. But it's a constant struggle for survival. And so instead of doing things where we can thrive and we can be happy and we can raise families and take care of each other and love each other, instead we're just in this constant fight for survival, for food, for housing. We're living in terrible conditions. Most of the houses on our territory have horrible black mold. The roofs of elders are falling in. We have exposure to the elements. We're getting ready for winter the best we can. We had elders who froze to death last winter, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we're doing everything we can to take care of each other, but we need your help. And so there's a couple of ways to help. Again, Conscious Point, please watch this. Please share it with everybody that you know. It's a good way to begin to get involved. The next thing you can do is follow us. We're again on Instagram. We have an account called Warriors of the Sunrise. And if you go to our bio, we have a link tree, which hopefully someone will be kind enough to share in the chat. But we have a number of ways that you can help there. You can help us with our land acquisition. We're desperately trying to raise money to reacquire some of these lands that were stolen from us by New York State in the Shinnecock Hills. It was 4,000 acres of land. Most of it contains very, very sacred burials. It's something that Graves Protection Warrior Society has been working diligently on for just decades. Again, when you watch Conscious Point, you'll learn a lot more about that. But you can take action on it by donating to a fund that the Peconic Land Trust has set up for us. It's called the Shinnecock Land Acquisition and Stewardship Fund. So it's not just for acquisition, but also for stewardship to assist us in taking care of these sacred places. We recently did some ground penetrating radar work and found, thankfully, undisturbed burials on this site that we had recently acquired. We had initially believed that this land had been completely desecrated when the land purchasers knowingly built a 70,000 square foot mansion on the highest peak, right where we for 3,000 years buried our leaders. And so we're working diligently not only to protect our ancestors, but to protect the living too, and making sure that we have enough just to survive, but hopefully more than that, to thrive and to succeed. And we're hoping that our children won't have to go through these same struggles, that we can bend the arc of justice now so that future generations don't have to go through this anymore. But again, we really need your help. So those are some things you could do. You could follow Shinnecock Kelp Farmers, follow us on Warriors of the Sunrise. We also have, if you visit the link tree there that someone has put in, we have a toolkit that will allow you to contact the governor and let her know that it's important, especially with this new commitment to honoring Indigenous people on this day, and specifically Shinnecock, that this lawsuit against our monument be dropped. It's unjust. It's our ancestral land. Everybody who is enrolled in the Shinnecock Nation today descends from this particular parcel of land. We recently, in May of 2020, had an adjudication by a New York State Supreme Court judge that this is in fact our ancestral land. And when he did what's called a balance of the equities, he told New York State that when you look at the record, when you look at the facts, when you look at everything that we have presented in our lawsuit, and the judge, he took 1 year to review everything. We had stacks of, I can't show you on the Zoom, but we had huge stacks of documentation proving that this is our ancestral territory, that it's never left Shinnecock hands, it's never been out of our possession. And the judge ruled that we have the right, Shinnecock has the right to use our land to take care of our people. We need to take care of our children. We need to take care of our elders. And the only way that we're going to do that is by engaging in economic opportunities. It's a struggle for survival. We can't do it. We can't make sure that people have groceries and that children have childcare and that elders have the care that they need without money. We can't depend on the waters anymore. We can't go fishing. We can't go shell fishing. So we need to be able to engage in the economy. And it's nothing new. New York State has attacked our economy since day one, whether it be our wampum trade. As soon as they found out, because Shinnecock, we're known as the minters of wampum. And so we had wampum mints. And wampum was used as the first currency. It was traded on the New York Stock Exchange until people found out, until New York State found out, how wealthy they could become. They started outsourcing it and making glass wampum beads to devalue it as our currency. And we were engaged as whalers, and that was taken away from us. And we were instead enslaved on these whaling ships while the colonists became wealthy. And just every single thing that we attempt to engage in, New York State finds a way to take away from us. So we can't continue to survive that way. We need you to use the toolkit that's in the link tree and call the governor. We have a script in there that tells you exactly what to do. The phone numbers are in there. It only takes a couple minutes. You can also send an email and let her know it's time to drop the lawsuit. She doesn't need to continue Cuomo's legacy against us. It's not right. It's not just. And the judge has already ruled that we have the right to do this, and it's our land. So those are just a couple of things that you can do to really help us out. And again, I thank you so much for listening. And really, if you want to get engaged, I just can't highly recommend Conscious Point enough to really start your journey. Or, if you can convince any of your friends, your library, or your local school to just watch the movie. It will really help us to get our story out there. And when people get to know us, when they get to learn more about us, there's really no way that you can help but to stand with us. So thank you again, everybody.
Cabernet Tila. And thank you, Jennifer, Tina, Becky, Matakas. And I thank the Poor People's Campaign because you help give us and so many people help and hope for the future. So I'm going to turn this back over to Reverend West and Tabonnet.
Thank you so much to all of you. It's a lot to hear and take in, the stories that we've just heard and the history that we've just heard. And as Jennifer said so well, because of the history of this country, the truth hurts. And yet that it's better to have that pain than to keep holding on to that lie. Because through that truth, we can see each other as siblings. So before we move on to the next parts of our program and hear from our Poor People's Campaign co-chairs, we just want to take a minute for all of us to sit with what we've just heard. It's hard to do this virtually in some ways than it is to share space in person. But we're gonna hear a little bit of music and take some time to reflect We invite folks, if you have a thought or a response that you want to share in the chat to the hosts and panelists, to do that during this time. Thank you.
We're receiving so many comments of gratitude and thanks, people listening in. So maybe all of the panelists can see those. Just a few of the comments here. They're coming in really fast. Gratefulness for the courage and thought that went into tonight. Someone commented about the information about devaluing wampum by making imitation is very revealing. That's a pattern we continue to see. People are excited and encouraged to share the film Conscience Point. A number are reaching out around follow-up and connecting and with some other questions. And we will be saving these questions and sharing with panelists so that folks can respond in due time. Thank you, everyone. I believe we're passing to Jamel right now.
Powerful.
There's a moral revolution going on, going on. There's a moral revolution going on. There's a moral revolution going on, going on. There's a moral revolution going on. Put your ear to the ground, feel the power moving around. There's a moral revolution going on. Put your ear to the ground, feel the power moving around. There's a moral revolution going on. There's a racial justice movement going on, going on. There's a racial justice movement going on. There's a racial justice movement going on, going on. There's a racial justice movement going on. Put your ear to the ground, feel the power moving around. There's a moral revolution going on. Put your ear to the ground, feel the power moving around. There's a moral revolution going on. There's an eco-justice movement going on, going on. There's an eco-justice movement going on. There's an eco-justice movement going on, going on. There's an eco-justice movement going on. Put your ear to the ground, feel the power moving around. There's a moral revolution going on. Put your ear to the ground, feel the power moving around. There's a moral revolution going on. There's a poor people's campaign going on, going on. There's a poor people's campaign going on. There's a poor people's campaign going on, going on. There's a poor people's campaign going on. There's a movement happening, I can feel it. There's a movement happening, I can feel it. Movement happening, I can feel it. There's a movement happening, I can feel it. I can feel it in my bones. 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 Yeah, yes. Oh, oh. It's a moral revolution. It's a moral revolution. It's a no. Yeah. Oh. Put your ear to the ground. Woo. Feel the power. Revolution. It's a moral revolution. Put your ear to the ground. Woo. Feel the power. Wow. There's a poor people's campaign going on, going on. There's a poor people's campaign going on. There's a poor people's campaign going on, going on. There's a poor people's campaign going on. I tell you, there's a movement happening. I can feel it. I tell you, there's a movement happening. Oh, I can feel it. I feel it in my hands. I feel it in my feet. All over me. All over me. I'm talking revolution. A revolution. I'm talking revolution. Oh, a revolution. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jamel Coy Hudson. I'm a theomusicologist with the New York State Poor People's Campaign. Tonight, I have the distinct honor of introducing two human beings who've dedicated their lives to speaking truth to power. The Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II is the president and senior lecturer of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
bishop with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, visiting professor at Union Theological Seminary, pastor at Greenleaf Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and the author of 4 books. We are called to be a movement, Revive Us Again, Vision and Action in Moral Organizing, the Third Reconstruction, Moral Mondays, Fusion Politics, and the Rise of a New Justice Movement, and Forward Together, a Moral Message for the Nation. In 2018, Reverend Dr. Barber helped launch the Poor People's Campaign, helped relaunch the Poor People's Campaign, which was begun by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, starting with an historic wave of protests in state capitals and in Washington, D.C., calling for a moral agenda and a moral budget to address the 5 interlocking injustices of systemic racism, systemic poverty, the war economy and militarism, ecological devastation, and the false moral narrative of Christian nationalism. There are currently 45 state coordinating committees across the country mobilizing around the Poor People's Jubilee platform, and we must do more. Mobilize, organize, register, and educate people for a movement that votes. We thank you, Bishop Barber, for your leadership, and we are honored to have you here at this Indigenous Peoples Day, Land Back, and the Third Reconstruction, Truth Commission with the Shinnecock Nation. We are also fortunate to have with us tonight the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris. Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris is the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival with Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris is the director of the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice at Union Theological Seminary. She is an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church USA and teaches at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris is the editor of We Cry Justice, Reading the Bible with the Poor People's Campaign. She is also the author of Always With Us, What Jesus Really Said About the Poor, and co-author of Revive Us Again, Vision and Action in Moral Organizing. She has been published in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, Newsweek, The Guardian, The Nation, The Hill, Boston Review, CNN, Religion News, Service, Sojourners, Religion Dispatches, and elsewhere. We are honored to have Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris with us tonight on this Indigenous People Day at Land Back and the Third Reconstruction, Truth Commission with the Shinnecock Nation. And with that, I'll turn this part of our program over to Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamel. And there is indeed a moral revolution going on, and we can feel it in our bones and our spirit. It has to be, because even physics tells you there's an equal opposite reaction. So with all this immoral stuff going on, there has to be a moral movement going on. And if you're alive now, thank God you know which side to be on. And you're not confused, because as Orwell said, telling the truth in a time of deceit is revolutionary in and of itself. Even if folk don't hear the truth, telling the truth and knowing the truth in a time of deceit is revolutionary. You know, I want to take my 10 minutes and then turn it over to Reverend Dr. Liz, who's so powerful in so many ways on these matters. But I've been doing some reading as a Tuscaroran. And I want to say that my great-great-grandmama was full-blooded Tuscaroran. And we never, even in North Carolina, you know, so much was done to keep us from ever even being recognized as a tribe. So in some ways, I'm still disconnected from my history. My history is similar to the Shinnecock, because my history is mulatto, white, black, and Tuscaroran. Just like the Shinnecock Nation ended up being very mixed in many ways. And I have kindred in the New York Tuscaroran groups. But down in North Carolina, we would never reference. My father was, because he wrote on these matters, was recognized as an honorary chief. And I was able on one occasion to do a sweat in his honor and the honor of other elders. Now, I will tell you, I did not make it to the 4th and 5th rocks. Interesting story about that. I made it to the 3rd rock, and my father had been dead about 10 years, and I looked to my right and saw my father. And of course, the chiefs and the others were very, very moved by that. It scared me to death almost. And but it was a very powerful spiritual experience. And then afterwards, later, I've had the privilege of seeing the eagle up close in Eastern North Carolina, at least on 3 occasions. One time, eagle, literally, I was driving in Eastern North Carolina, and he came down and flew almost, and it wasn't a buzzard, wasn't a hawk, right in front of the car almost, just above it, and then lifted. And so I honor and take great pride in being able to share with you on tonight and be a part of this battle for humanity. You know, I've been reading that Long Island, one of the names given before Long Island was Land of Tribute. And how the nation, the people, the Native American, as they like to call them, I like to say First Nation, many of them died. I'm thinking about it in the time of COVID, when European colonization came and they infected the people with infectious disease. And I've been reading about that 1658 smallpox epidemics, where 2/3 of First Nation people on the island died because of an epidemic. I've been also reading about how the land was and the communities were disrupted by the encroachment of the Dutch, and then later on the English, and how they had to shift their cultures from fishing and hunting to horticulture, and how by 1741, it was an estimate that only about 400 survived, First Nation folk on these islands, and how in 1641, you know, the colonists signed a lease with the Shinnecock Indians, but then in 1703, when it was ratified, it gave more land to the English colonies. It was all a trick. Then the law was passed, in 1792, took away the regular way that the people governed themselves and forced them into a governmental system that was to the advantage of the colonists. I'm saying this because we have over 300 people on. They don't all know this, that in history, it gets written that we helped them organize themselves. But actually what happened is they organized them away from themselves, and then they would manipulate who got elected. It's why many First Nation tribes don't trust the governmental structures that have been forced upon Native people, because they were designed to force them into place, and then they would pay off the leaders, similar to what they did to African nations. In the Congo and all, they would put their own leaders in place, or leaders that they could buy off, so that they could say that the Native people agreed to this and that, when actually it was just a person who was Native in face, but in heart and in money, they were paid off by the structures. I see head shaking. And this is a common thing that goes on among the oppressed of the world, right? It's a common practice of colonization. In fact, one of the goals of colonization is to destroy people with people that look like them, so that they don't have to get the blame for it. To figure out a way to infiltrate the people, so that the people, they can always say, well, it was one of them that agreed to this. They did it the same way with slaves. They put all of the overseers were Black, and they treated the slaves sometimes worse than the white master. So if they were beaten, they say, well, a Black man beat them. You know, we see Republicans doing that today. Well, Tim Scott doesn't want voters' rights. He doesn't want police reform, so it must be okay because he's Black. Well, not necessarily. You know, it's one thing to have the heart of a people, the heart of a Shinnecock, the heart of a Tuscarora, not just the face. And we've learned that down through history. I also want people to know that but it's amazing that this country took from the Shinnecock people, but when they needed folk to be on the ships, one writer said there was not a ship that left the port that didn't have a Shinnecock male on that ship, right? Not a ship, because they knew that they knew the waters. A lot of times it was through slavery or forced labor, but they wouldn't go. And then when their ships got in trouble, all the legends, all the stories of Shinnecock people giving their lives to try to save white sailors. I was reading one story where 10 Shinnecock men lost their lives, Liz. There's something crazy about racism in this country, is that it'll push you aside to steal your stuff, and then when it gets in trouble, it'll come back and get you. Just like people did during this COVID. They push poor workers and essential workers aside, but then in the midst of COVID, we say, oh no, you're essential. Now before COVID, they were service workers. During COVID, you're essential. When we're in trouble, you're essential. Just like we know from history that when they wanted to build a U.S. Coast Guard, who did they go to? The Shinnecock Nation. First, it was called the United States Life Saving Service. Then it was called the Civil Air Patrol. But later on, it's called the Coast Guard. And when they wanted the real seamen that would jump in the deepest water, in the roughest waters, they would go to the brothers in the Shinnecock Nation. So we got this strange reality of America. One minute for greed and for wealth, will steal from people and take, exterminate, but then turn around and go right back to those same people when it gets in trouble. And we know that you've had to sue even the Department of Interior. I was reading down, I said, Department of Interior is supposed to protect. And Shinnecock, like I tell you, has had to sue the protector or the supposed protector, right? And it's particularly about this land. And not only that, and I think Mark Thompson is on this land, on this call tonight, but has had to fight for reparations. Reparations. And when you look at what they've done to make money, it's amazing to me. I can't hardly say, because it'll make me say words like I heard one young lady said they make us drink their shit. Well, somebody said that one of the lectures tonight, but the shit that people do, excuse me for using that French, but you're gonna take my burial land and put a golf cart, of course, on top of it. Now we're in Maryland right now where they did a similar thing to a black group of land. We're fighting in Maryland now. Just a few weeks ago. This was black people, poor black people. They built an apartment complex on top of their burial ground, right? So when I looked at this and all of that, and then the thing that got me, people that are listening, you should know how devious they've been toward this community, that on one occasion, they actually found out, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that they found out that investors conspired to break the 1,000-year lease that they had for the people had. Now, first of all, how you gonna let a people lease land that's theirs anyway? But then they broke it, and they used a fraudulent petition, claimed it was from Shinnecock tribal members, even though the members protested, but it was plain out forgery to steal the land. I wonder how many people, when they talk about going to Long Island and all of this wealth, know that, as Jeff DeSac said the other day when we were in Rome, you cannot go anywhere and find extreme wealth that you don't find under it extreme criminality. You hear what I said? You cannot go anywhere and find extreme wealth and not look underneath it and find extreme criminality. And so I think there's several things I'd like to end with. Number one, Liz, let's make sure that our team sends conscious point out to every member. We've got thousands upon thousands. I have about 400,000 on Twitter. We want to get that out, because the first thing you have to do to have the implementation of justice, if you have to change the imagination of the conscience. There will be no implementation of justice until there's a change in the consciousness, and you have to change the narrative, right? Second thing I want to say is you should know with the Poor People's Campaign and New York Poor People's Campaign, thank you so much for all you do. This is the reason why every piece of data that we produce in the Poor People's Campaign, we always disaggregate it by Black, white, Latino, First Nation, Asian, we always disaggregate every piece of data. And every policy that we write, when we write or make a demand, we make a demand based on the impact that it will have on all the communities. And then we have a specific piece in our third Reconstruction, ending poverty from the bottom up, on the indigenous community, written by indigenous people, written by First Nation people, that says that America can talk about being America unless America does right by indigenous people. And that's in the centerpiece of the Poor People's Campaign. And when we talk about race in the Poor People's Campaign, we don't just talk about racism from a Black standpoint. We talk about racism as it relates to Black and brown and indigenous. And even the collateral damage to white people. You have to. Second thing is, we've got to make sure in all the justice work we do, wherever we're working, in climate, in labor, we never forget to tell the first story. Because if we don't tell the first story of the first people who were here before anybody else came here, slave or otherwise, then our antidotes and our answers will be inadequate. You got to tell the first story. Spending time with the Apache Nation out in Oak Flat, Brother Winsler, former Chief Winsler, has drilled that into my head. My father, before he died, I don't know how many of you know this, but when I was born, you probably wouldn't know it. When I was born, the first fight my daddy had, almost went to jail, was when he was in the hospital. I had just been born, and they said, what do we put on his birth certificate? And the guy said, put Negro. And my dad said, no, you're going to put Negro, at that time, Negro with Indian descent and white. And they fought my father, almost arrested him, because he wouldn't back up. Because he said, you got to tell the whole story. You know, they wouldn't let him put, they wouldn't let him put a native first. But he said, it's got to be in there. The third thing is, when I was at the Vatican this past week, and the Pope was talking about, poverty and whatnot, and I'll send y'all the comments, I made it clear, you cannot talk about eradicating poverty until you tell the truth about the evil things done under the doctrine of discovery. You cannot. You've got to address the doctrine of discovery and how it worked and how it continues to fuel immoral understanding. This is why we're having such a problem with so-called, what they call it, what's this new, critical race theory. It's because the doctrine of discovery and all that it taught and manifest destiny is so ingrained in people, for them to hear the truth, they've got to unpack all the lies. In essence, they got to say, my mama, my grandma, my great-grandmama lied to me. And that's hard psychologically, but it must happen. The fourth thing is, I think that we have to use strong language. We have to, when we talk about these terms and we stand along with brothers and sisters in the Shinnecock Nation, we must say we're here because death happened here. Extermination happened here. Extermination. We have to use the same terms they used in the Holocaust. It's different kinds of extermination, still extermination. Heard somebody say it earlier. Then we've got to talk about reparations and correction. See, some folk want us to just talk about correction, but it must be about reparations, repair, and correction. That's why our reparations conversation in this country cannot just be about reparations to Black people. It cannot be, especially when you have, some of my Black brothers and sisters, did you hear Sister Tila say Shinnecocks were made slaves as well? The next thing we have to do in the Poor People's Campaign we're committed to helping with is we got to connect these fights. Now, I know that the First Nations are tribal, but we have to make sure that our battles are fusion. We can't let them separate what's happening to the Shinnecock to what's happening to the Apaches at Oak Flats. We've got to connect the battles because they want us to battle separately. That's a tool of defeating. And we've got to find a way, even though I know the tribal differences and all of that, You know, we say this to black and white folk all the time. There may be differences, but we've got to find a way to make sure we lift up the similarities of the battles and recognize that they all come from the same ugliness, the same meanness, the same lies. We've got to be one. And then I believe very soon in this fight, Taylor, we need to call something, Liz, and have faith leaders come to the burial ground and be very public about it. We need to come in full vestment, standing with the faith leaders of the Shinnecock Nation, bring the media, faith leaders, and have an open, but as we demand it to the governor now, we need to have an open season, an open service of repentance and call to action. And repentance must mean repair and correction, you know. And then maybe that same group of faith leaders needs to go straight to the governor's mansion in our full vestments, in robes, in things, with the Shinnecock brothers and sisters, and the people who own the land that the Capitol is sitting on, and deliver. And then lastly, next to last, we've got to make sure that First Nations, like the Shinnecock, like the Apaches, are totally involved and engaged in this green energy development. We cannot have people take the land on one hand back here, then turn around now and want to come back and use land, use resources. It's still, for green energy development. Because so much was taken from First Nation people, all these resources of green energy and money's that's coming, don't give us a doggone casino. Give us something that's gonna last and not just destroy our people. Even if we have, I'm not knocking the casino, people want that, but there's so much of, my son is heavy into green energy development. And I hope he can talk, he's gonna be a fellow and he's a Tuscarora, kinship, but he's gonna be a fellow at Union next year. So I hope, Tila, you can hook up with him. He's an environmental attorney and a physicist, environmental physicist. And then lastly, my prayer is that on June 18, 2020, when we have the mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington, and now we're getting other countries thinking about doing it on that date too, where we're gonna have not a day, but a declaration that poor and low-wealth people are not going anywhere. We're not gonna accept this. Even if they pass the Build Back Better, it ain't all that we need, that we demand. And we demand a third Reconstruction, and we plan to have thousands. My prayer is that we have a largest delegation of First Nation brothers and sisters, the Shinnecock Nation and others, not just attending that day, but speaking to the nation and to the world. And we uniting our demands. See, in the Poor People's Campaign, we don't say, well, we just want such and such thing for poverty. We say we demand this, we demand this, we demand. And when they ask us, well, which one is most important? We say all of them. Because we're tired of billionaires getting trillions. They never get asked what they want, they get trillions. We're tired of poor and low wealth folk getting asked, which one thing do you want? We want everything that has to do with the fullness of our humanity. We want everything that has to do with justice. It ain't about giving us nothing. It's about doing what's right for what has been stolen, what has been exterminated, what has been taken, what has been revalued. I heard you talk about how they revalued the money. This movement is about undoing robbery. And notice the word I use, and I'll turn it over to Liz. I did not say theft intentionally. See, because a thief, Malcolm X, of all people, talked about the difference. See, he was a thief. He was a cat burglar. You go in when folks sleep and you take from them. But what has happened to Shinnecock people and Tuscarora people and Apache people, and I could go through black, has been robbery. Because what a robber does is comes right in your face and takes your stuff. That's what the difference between a robber and a thief. And this country has, many of the people in this country that helped build it were robbers, not thieves. They did some thievery undercover, but most of it was straight up robbery. You rob people from Africa. You rob the land of the people that were already here before you got here and then claim that you discovered something. And we have to be the movement that makes sure that there is reparation for the robbery. There is correction for the robbery. And you know what? Somebody said to me one day, well, you're never going to get all of that. Well, I'd rather die fighting for it. No, I'd rather live fighting. I'd rather live in truth than to exist in a lie. Because I know at the ultimate truth, crushed to the ground, is going to rise and is eventually going to be victorious, one way or the other. So God bless you all. Thank you all so much. We are together. First Nation, Shinnecock, Fusion, we are all one people. And this movement is about that. And we can do it together. We must do it together. We've got to do it together. And you know what they fear the most? Us walking together. That is the great fear of the greedy, past and present. That is the greatest fear. And there's nobody to keep us divided from each other but ourselves. It's not always easy. We cannot make perfection the enemy of great, but we must stay together. Forward together, not one step back. God bless you. Love you. Dr. Liz.
God bless you and everyone. It is such an honor and a blessing to be with everyone this evening. I thank everyone here for inviting me, and mostly thank those who testified for your willingness to share those powerful testimonies, to share truth. Today, every day, we must mourn the loss of lives, language, land, culture. Mourn the genocide of Indigenous peoples from the Shinnecock Nation and Indigenous nations all over the country and world that is still going on. We must commit to struggling for justice, justice for all who have shared this evening, for the Shinnecock Nation, for all Native and Indigenous peoples and nations, for all of the 140 million poor and low-income people in the United States of America. I'm the granddaughter of people who survived the Armenian genocide, and I learned a saying at the 100th anniversary of that genocide. It's that we remember and we demand. We remember and we demand. We remember those who have died over the past months. We remember the Indigenous women and men and Two-Spirit people who were killed by colonialism and dispossession, disease, and poverty. We remember those living with mold in their homes, buried in desecrated graves. We remember the millions of poor and low-income Indigenous people living in the United States today. We remember the 250,000 people of all races, from all places and all religions, who die because poverty and inequality every year in a nation that throws away more food than it takes to feed every person all over the world. And it is with their memories that we demand. We demand Indigenous sovereignty, the protection of sacred rights and sites, the preservation of water and land and air. We demand healthcare and housing. We demand a decent education for all children, not boarding schools. We demand voting rights and living wage jobs, the rights to culture, the practice of sacred rituals, the right to freedom of religion. We demand to thrive, as I heard earlier this evening, to thrive, not just barely survive, to lift from the bottom and let everybody rise. I looked up in the dictionary the definition of the word demand, and it says that to demand is to ask for with authority, to claim as a right, an urgent or pressing requirement. Frederick Douglass, as he was working to abolish slavery, said this about demands, that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never will. It never did, and it never will. Dr. King and Cesar Chavez, the National Wealth Rights Organization, and coal miners in Kentucky, and the Jewish Federation, and indigenous people from the American Indigenous Movement, and others building the 1968 Poor People's Campaign said this: our nettlesome task is to discover how to organize our strength into compelling power so that the government cannot continue to elude our demands. It would be the height of naivete to wait passively until the administration had somehow been infused with such blessings of goodwill that it implored us for our programs. Even the Bible has much to say about demands, especially what God demands of the nation and what God's people must demand of those with power and authority. Micah 6 says, "What does the Lord demand of you? But to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with God." Isaiah demands that we stop passing laws that deprive the poor of their rights, making women and children their prey. Jeremiah, that the wealthy stop pushing people off their own land, stop desecrating graves, stop profiting from pandemic and crisis. These and other justice leaders remind us that movements don't just curse the darkness. We don't just awake the people to what is wrong. We come together in power with demands. We rise together. We demand justice until we claim our rights. And this is what I have heard this evening, what the powerful leaders of the Shinnecock Nation are doing. This is what the New York Poor People's Campaign is working on. We're not alone. We're not afraid. We can come together. We can make a difference. We can make life better for our children and our grandchildren. We can remember, we can demand, and we can move forward together, not one step back.
Thank you so much, Reverend Barbara and Reverend Liz. We are so grateful for those inspiring words. Thank you to all of our testifiers. Folks, we're just about to wrap up. I'm going to share some action steps in just a moment. My name is Joe Paparone. I'm the lead organizer of the Labor Religion Coalition of New York State. I'm really glad to be here, humbled to hear and learn from all of our testifiers today. But education is just the first step. We know that. We need to take action together. So I'm going to share my screen here, and someone just very helpfully put into the chat a collection of links. Much of this is stuff you've heard about from all of our testifiers this evening. We've got it in a nice convenient spot for you. We will send this out via email along with a recording, probably within the next 24 to 48 hours or so. But I'm going to talk through a few key things that you can do. Some of these things you can do right now. First up, support the Potawatomi Medicine Lodge. That is at the Shinnecock Nation. This is direct aid, mutual aid. We know that the rich aren't going to come riding in to save us, and we need to take care of one another. So we heard about the immediate plight, and some of us have a little bit more resources than others, and it is necessary that we lift one another up. This isn't charity. This is about solidarity. This is about making sure that we can all stay in this fight together for the long haul. So there is a link you can contribute online in that link tree. Or if you want to quickly write down this address, I'll leave this slide up for just a moment, and you can mail checks directly there. And again, we'll also send this out via email afterwards. As was mentioned numerous times, the documentary Conscience Point is outstanding. I've watched it myself. It's just over an hour long. I think this is a fantastic thing. If you are part of a faith community, of a neighborhood action group, of a labor union, get folks together, however you are organized, and watch this film. You can, as mentioned, you can rent it online for $5. It may be available at different libraries as well, and through different PBS access, but the link to access that documentary is available in that link tree as well. Saying from our friends at the National Union of the Homeless is we only get what we're organized to take. And this is just one piece. This event tonight is just one piece of how we're getting organized together. So it's very likely that you heard about this through the Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival. But if for some reason you are not already connected to the Poor People's Campaign, as was mentioned by Jamel, we've got coordinating committees in 45 states. In New York, we've got 9 regional organizing committees. No matter where you are in the state or country, there is a Poor People's Campaign near you. We need you to join up and get involved. There's lots to do. This ruling class ain't going to take down itself, and so we got to get organized together. The Warriors of the Sunrise, as mentioned, is an organization of the Shinnecock. We have a link to numerous things that were shared by Tila. And actually, it's a whole additional set of links: the Shinnecock Land Acquisition and Stewardship Fund, further links for Streaming Conscience Point, some additional news and toolkits to support the Shinnecock in the various fights that they have going on, both locally on Long Island and with the state of New York. You can also buy these rad Warriors of the Sunrise t-shirts, which I just did earlier today when I came across that link. They're awesome, highly recommended. If you're in New York, I encourage you to join the Labor Religion Coalition in New York State's email list. I'm going to talk again in a moment. This is the first in a series of Truth Commissions. So if you want to catch up info on the upcoming ones, that's a good way to join in, as well as Reverend Liz and Reverend Barber's organizations that anchor the National Poor People's Campaign, the Kairos Center, based in New York, and Repairers of the Breach, based in North Carolina. These are excellent organizations to follow along. You will learn tons about what's going on around the country, around the world. And frankly, the ruling class is in overdrive to confuse us about the crises we're facing, both globally and locally, right? They want to obscure much of the history that we've heard about today. And it's important that we join together, that we stay connected with one another and continually educate ourselves, participating in collective political education so that we can get organized to fight back. Tomorrow, there will be a book talk hosted at the People's Forum, an amazing movement incubator in New York City, for the book that was mentioned, We Cry Justice, Reading the Bible with the Poor People's Campaign, edited by Reverend Dr. Liz. I've got my copy right here. You probably can't see that, but it's fantastic. We know that the Bible is a dangerous tool. It has been used by many, right, and particularly the colonizers, to justify many of the awful things that we have heard about the history. But it has also been a source of inspiration and strength and power for the poor and dispossessed throughout history. So we're not just going to let the ruling class and our opponents just have this incredibly powerful tool all to themselves. We recognize that understanding the battle for the Bible, this is contested terrain in our cultural landscape, and so we're not just going to let them have that. We're going to fight so that the messages of justice and hope and power for the poor and dispossessed are uplifted from these ancient texts. And this is an excellent opportunity to learn about that directly from not only Reverend Liz, but many of the contributors who are themselves organizers and leaders in the Poor People's Campaign. That is tomorrow night. And the RSVP link for that is included in that link tree. Lastly, as I mentioned, not second to last, this is a part of a series of Truth Commissions that the Labor Religion Coalition and the New York State Poor People's Campaign, along with various partners, are hosting. Will be hosting around the state over the next several months. The next one will be in December, and will be focused on hunger, housing, and the third reconstruction. Our testifiers will be from the Capital Region, where standing in the shadows of these massive marble plaza that Governor Rockefeller built ages ago, displacing whole poor communities. People don't have enough food to eat. People can't afford housing. And the state capitol is the place that supposedly could rein in Wall Street and maybe redistribute some of that wealth that they keep accumulating despite the pandemic. But if you can join us on December 9th, the link to RSVP for that is now available. Literally moments before we started at 6 p.m. that link went live, so you can RSVP for that and get all the call info as that comes around. And we invite you, no matter where you are in the country, to join us for that. The last thing, and this was mentioned as well, June 18th, if you don't have this marked and circled and starred on whatever kind of calendar that you have, go ahead and do that right now. But the Mass Poor People's and Low-Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington will be happening on June 18th. A powerful Generationally transformative, I believe, is the phrase I've heard some of our Poor People's Campaign leaders describe this. We want as many people as possible to come to DC to show the power and unity of our fusion movement, as Reverend Barber discussed, and to make the demands that we know we need, that the people in power aren't just going to give us without a fight. So we hope that everyone will join there. Stay tuned. If you're connected and following any of those organizations that I mentioned already, you'll get more info on this as it comes together. There will be buses from all over New York and all around the country to get as many people there as possible. And we need your help. I'm being told there's one additional announcement in the chat. Reverend Barber is asking, and we announced that folks tune into the press conference in DC tomorrow at 9:30 a.m., where poor and low-wage women from states all over the country will speak to why we need a bold Build Back Better bill. Ooh, that'd be words right there. That's awesome, though. That press conference, if I'm pretty confident they are usually streamed through the National Poor People's Campaign Facebook page or on the website. You can find, and usually Repairers of the Breach and Cairo Center also cross-post those as well. So you'll be able to find that if you're following any of those organizations on Facebook. All right. Once again, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And I'm going to pass it to Claire to close us out with one more song.
Hi, all. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. This is Getting Into Step, which was adapted by Avery book, and our very own Geronimo Barr. And I'm honored to be here and to express my gratitude to all of the testifiers and everyone who spoke. We're getting into step. We're getting into step. We're getting into step to win our freedom. Too many years we've been divided. Now's the time to unify. We're getting into step to win our freedom. We're getting into step. We're getting into step. We're getting into step to win our freedom. People kicked out of their homes. The homeless union daily grows. We're getting into step to win our freedom. We're getting into step. We're getting into step. We're getting into step to win our freedom. They tear our children from our arms. 1,000 voices raise alarm. We're getting into step to win our freedom. We're getting into step. We're getting into step. We're getting into step to win our freedom. Let those who labor hold the reins. The time is now to break our chains. We're getting into step to win our freedom. We're getting into step to win our freedom. We're getting into step to win our freedom. Thank you all.
Muskanawash, Tabane.
All together.
Now one step back.